All right, we are live in Laguna Beach at the Ben Reinberg I Own It Studios today, and we just keep adding incredible guests, and today is no different. This young man is a best-selling author. He's an award-winning entrepreneur, a business mentor. He's one of my mentors. He's a musician, and he's a founder of the number one global business training company. Kane Minkus, welcome to the show. It's great to see you. It's a real treat to have you on today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ben. Whenever I hear my bio, I always hope that my mother-in-law is listening.
She would be proud, I can assure you of that. So, um, I know you went to Berklee College of Music, and then you built Industry Rockstar. What do you envision when you think of a rock star in the business world and in life more generally?
So it's a great question, and the reason, there were about 29 other companies prior to, I'd say, Industry Rockstar, and so what I learned about what it takes to be a rockstar founder, and this is who I love to work with in the world, is founder CEOs, people who are started the business but are also running it. And I think there's many things it takes, which is why it's a complex thing and why I love working with CEOs, because I think it takes, if I had to sum it up into one thing that I think nobody talks about is it takes the ability to expand your consciousness and your comfort level with managing a lot of complex situations all at the same time. And interestingly enough, because you're sitting in a studio here with all this music equipment, which I absolutely love, and my first love and background was in music. I was a record producer for Sony Music, and I've been playing piano and singing and arranging and orchestrating and producing music since I was, 5 years old, basically. And what I loved about that, because music seems like it's a far distant thing from business, but in fact, many, many, many great founders, CEOs, executives, high achieving people, I find out are highly accomplished musicians. And in fact, I started an engineering school before I decided to extract myself from the horrid experience of engineering school. And one of the things that I learned is that in the engineering schools, they have found a link between music and, of course, math and science. And so to me, a rock star, which is different probably than the average image of, someone, like, I don't know, Mick Jagger or some, Led Zeppelin rock star. To me, the rock stars, I grew up on like the Pink Floyd, the Phil Collinses, the Peter Gabriels. They were people that were looking to make a huge difference in the world with their expression and their message. They were people that were very sharp about how they were crafting their career, crafting their image, crafting their brand, the team that they would work with, where they would place and position their music and their albums, and where they would tour. Like, there was a lot of intellectual craft to what goes on in the music industry that I think people miss because they're so focused on the excitement or the glamour or the rock and roll. But being a producer, I was involved in the day-to-day conversation of how do we take this interesting, brilliant person and turn them into a superstar. And there's a lot of thought that goes behind that. So that's how I look at founders today, as artists and rock stars of their own companies.
So I really like your 9-step formula that you've developed, and I have some questions on some of the specific steps as we get into it. But I wanted to ask you up front, what step do most entrepreneurs you work with struggle with the most, and why is that?
Well, that's a great question. I think they struggle with each one greatly, which is why it becomes such a, 9 simple steps, right? You take 9 little steps, and that should be no big deal, right? And I think each one is quite deep, right? And for those that are not familiar with it, starts with everything from concepting your genius or finding your calling, all the way through to, having your offers hit the marketplace and being able to scale up your offers, globally, and everything in between. So, you know, I think that if we started at step one, which is about getting your calling right, I actually think that a lot of business owners miss that. And I think that they focus on things like their passion, because we were taught to follow our passions, or we're taught to, go figure out where there's a lot of money. And, I spent many years working with Richard Branson from Virgin. We did a lot of events together and brought him in, and he became let's say, I don't know if I call him a friend, but definitely a collegial, we did a lot of stuff together. So we got a lot of time together, a lot of dinners and things. And he would often say, if you want to really win at the game of business, do not go after your passion. Do not go after money. Design your life. What's the life you want? And design a business that allows you to really express your life in the world, whether it's family or whether it's, what you feel you're absolutely called to do. And so we redesigned all of our businesses after spending more time with him to focus on what do we want to do as a life and a lifestyle. What are we here to do on this planet? And how do we design our companies to take us there? And I think that
So,
first step, that fundamental step, is often missed.
so was he mentioning working around your purpose? What is it, your vision, your purpose, and that's where you should tailor your career around because that's where you gravitate your passion around?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time on people who have very deep distinctions in each one of these words. Like, one night I was touring through India, and we brought Dr. John DeMartini with us, who became a close friend over the years. And we were having dinner, and I was talking about my passion and this passion, the passion. And he pauses me, he says, "Kane, do you know what passion means?" And I said, "No." He says, "The etymology of the word passion means to suffer."
Mm,
So he says, "So I don't use the word passion, I use the word inspired mission." And I thought,
mm.
okay, well, that's great. That's a brilliant way of looking at it. So everybody's got their different distinctions, but I think setting aside semantics, yes, it's about really getting clear about what your passion, what your calling is, what your inspired mission is, and then designing everything around that versus working backwards from the market or from fears or concerns or expectations from family members or yourself. It's really about doing what you believe you should be doing.
So let's touch on a little bit of your inspiration. You started a lot of companies over the years. How many exactly since you were 24, would you say?
So so my wife and I combined now are going on over 40 companies that we've launched. And to be fair, some of those are divisions of companies that had their own life. So we've counted those because they're like, it's basically like starting another company. But we've started over 40 companies over the years. We've been involved. We've taught and trained over 3 million entrepreneurs globally. We've personally advised over 20,000 companies ourselves. So we've been in and out of a lot of maps and worldviews around business across the world.
Do you have exit plans for these 40s you're working on, or
Yeah,
how
my
do you view
kids.
them?
My kids' exit plan.
That's a good one. So, Industry Rockstar is your business training organization,
Yeah.
and you've had thousands of participants over the years. Share with everyone like what you like about focusing on your training, and where is it that you find people need that the most help?
Okay, both great questions. Um, so I happen to have a deep love for educating, and it comes from probably my family, which is when I was born. I have two older siblings. I have an older brother who's about 10 years older than me, an older sister who's 7 years older than me. And when I was born, around that time, the school called my parents to tell them that my sister, my older sister, was diagnosed with learning disabilities, and they said she's not producing, very good in class. She's not keeping up. She's, obviously got learning disabilities. She's not going to be able to do very well. And they basically painted this very gray and horrible picture of her future of being able to be an achiever. They basically told her she probably wouldn't be able to get into colleges because she wouldn't be able to compete. Just really like a very negative view. Now, my father is a CFO. He was a chief financial officer. So he was really a numbers guy and great at what he did, but had no background in child development. He really left it up to my mother. But something about this conversation really triggered him, got him very angry that somebody would kind of pigeonhole. And I think it was for him as well. I think my dad didn't grow up with as much opportunity as he would have liked. And to hear someone say that to about his child, that Papa Bear response, like,
Yeah,
that's not gonna be my child. You're not gonna
that's
create
right.
my child.
That's right.
And we've worked a lot, of course, with Les Brown. He's become a close friend over the years, and he has a quote that I absolutely love, where he says, "Never let somebody else's opinion become your story."
Mm, that's
And
powerful.
yeah, it's a great, great quote. It's in so many ways. So my dad didn't have that personal development background or any of this stuff. This was back in the, let's say, late 70s, I think, or yeah, late 70s. Um, but he knew that he needed to figure out how to help my sister. So he went all in on understanding how to develop kids and brains and how it all works and the mind and everything. And became the impetus for studying all that. And he studied Jean Piaget and Ken Wilber. He became friends with Howard Gardner, who was the creator of multiple intelligence theories. And he studied all this stuff, and he put together a process where he was going to help my sister develop her mind and her brain and her intelligence, and he crushed it. He actually created a patented system to profile children to understand what they need to learn the best for themselves. And he was very, very vocal about every child has a different setup, system, way of learning and processing. Now, fast forward today, and having studied things like neuroscience and neurolinguistics, we know that the brain and the mind processes very differently for every person. And we respect that today. Today, we appreciate the differences. But back then, in the 70s, it was like you either did it this way or you were kind of out of the system. You were weird.
Mhm.
So he got a patented process. He created a whole company called Kids, Dads, Moms, and he just started going to work, finding and sourcing that stuff. Now, fast forward, essentially, my sister became a top student at the university. She became dean's list at a university. She went on to be a top executive in the fashion industry. She's now become a top executive in product companies. She's recently launched her own company. She's done over $1 billion in transactions in retail for products, and she was on the Profit several times with Marcus Lemonis. Kevin Harrington loves her up because she's brilliant in product. So what we can see is your destiny is not predetermined by anybody's opinion, and whatever you start with can be developed.
Mm, that's
So
fascinating.
because I was 7 years younger, now they had this company going, and now they're deep into it, right? So now I become the guinea pig, and they're like testing products and games and Mensa games on me. They've got me in Northwestern University by 9 years old at enrichment courses, and they're just going full on to see how much they can do. And that's why I'm so weird. Is basically what I tell everybody. But I just got into the groove of the fact that it's a daily routine to look at how can you increase your aptitude, your ability, your intelligence, and your achievement. It's not something you do. It's not something that's a burden. You just do it every day. So I
Mhm.
just love doing that every day with people.
Well, that kind of leads into commitment. I mean, success is created from commitment. And it sounds like where you're going with that is when you can commit to something and focus and persistence, that's what creates success, which was probably the foundation for your sister when you think about it. She showed up and was committed to anything that she's done in life. And kudos to her, because that's fantastic that she had a disability. She figured out how to overcome it, and now she's wildly successful. And it just shows you that it doesn't matter where you come from or what your challenges are. If you're committed and you're persistent and focused, you could create success in your life. So it's a
Absolutely.
great example and story you gave. So um, brand building is something that I believe many talented entrepreneurs struggle with, and something I've been working on myself. Could you share more about your approach to brand building, and how have you found success personally with your experience with it?
So brand building. So I love brand building, and I think it relates back to the love of commercials. When we were young, we used to always get together around the TV, and we would watch the TV, but we were never that fascinated by what was going on the TV. We actually would love the commercials. That was the whole thing, and so we would really look at how products and services are really marketed, and I always love that. So when it comes to branding, I ended up working with major companies like Disney and Microsoft and all sorts of other companies where we were doing major brands, and we were looking at how they tell the story. And the whole thing around branding is really about the storytelling. How do you tell the story of a product or a service or a personal brand? Now, I wrote a book in 2009, 2010, quite a bit ago, around personal branding. I was one of the first people to get really, really like vocal about how you can build personal brands. And so in today's environment, I love working with founders, executives, and leadership teams around how to take their personal brands and turn them into powerful stories that they can really use out in the world. So, there's different aspects to branding, but if we just kind of boiled it down to one thing that I learned from working with these major corporations like Disney and Microsoft and launching products with them is you have to find a unique, powerful story that is really resonant and unique about you. And when I say that, people go, yeah, yeah, let's create something. And what I actually do a lot with my clients is I look at what are the resonant features of themselves. How do we extend the personality into the brand and create a world and a thematic world of branding around who you are?
Hmm.
And actually, if I may reveal a little bit, because Ben and I work on his branding these days, we're just working on that, working on a whole bunch of stuff for Ben together. But we were starting conversations, and we said, okay, let's look at some thematic elements of Ben, and we went through a number of different concepts and ideas. But in asking Ben and even asking the people around him could see there were some very specific themes, and we focused in on this theme around mindfulness and how Ben is so interested in mindful. I mean, look at the thoughtful questions that you ask in this interview, and it's really a theme for Ben. He cares a lot about being mindful about his investing and mindful about his life, and the fact that this whole podcast has conversations about health and your mindset and your business. It's like he's got this holistic approach to everything, and that's a very, very strong extension of him. So we're working on building out this whole brand around the mindful investor, and that will create a theme and a story in the marketplace that people can go, wow, that's really unique to Ben. right? So that's what I'm looking for when I'm looking at branding. How do we really take an extension of the human being and turn them into an interesting thematic story?
Okay. No, it's fantastic. So you built a large personal brand for Kane Minkus, and ever since it extended, which includes your wife, now it's Kane and Alessia,
Mhm.
and it's shifting to a partnership. And you changed your approach to industry rockstar. Has it changed your approach to personal branding now? And how has your partnership with your wife uh, given you more insight on your personal brand, and now you have a brand together, and how has that impacted you?
Yeah, well, so I actually love partnerships. Every one of my companies I've had is partnerships. I don't work that well as a lone wolf guy. I love to have somebody to bounce off of. And I think maybe even coming from the writing days when I was writing with, for the record labels, we'd always get in, at least one other person or a couple. So I love the energy of having somebody else that's at a decision-making level with me, that I can rely on. Um, so I've had partners in all my companies. And when I started Industry Rockstar, I actually started with a very close friend of mine named Jeff, and it was Jeff and Kane. And we love this duo thing because even on stage, which was very unique because it's really complex to put two people on stage at the same time to co-lead something. I mean, talk about being complex. That's the most complex thing you can do. There's several people who like work individually with their couple, with a partner on stage, but we would do it at the same time on stage. And we really worked many years to craft that whole experience because we felt that the duality of that branding together was very powerful. At some point, Jeff stepped out of the company to move on to other things. And I happened to meet Alessia the same year on a tour. I was touring with Robert and Kim Kiyosaki and Tony Robbins through Europe. She was in the audience in Italy because she was a serial entrepreneur and she was coming to learn some new business stuff. And we had about 3,000 people in the audience. Nobody spoke any English. They all had their headphones on. So that meant everything was getting simultaneously translated, which means every time I told a joke, I had to wait like 7 seconds for everybody to laugh. And I learned very quickly that my jokes don't translate in every language. So I learned that the translators were saying to the audience, "And now you laugh," to get the point. Anyway, so we
It
met.
was like the applause sign in a
That's right.
studio.
Totally was.
Right.
Yeah. Applause, applause, laughter, laughter.
Right.
So we met, and she didn't speak any English, but we quickly fell in love just energetically. And she's such a fast integrator. She learned English within about 6 months, which was amazing, and moved to where I was living in Australia at that time. And one of the things that I wanted and what I loved in having this dual brand versus just being an individual is I wanted this feminine power on stage because I noticed when we were speaking around the world in stadiums that half of the stadiums were women, but
Mm.
everybody on stage was a man. And that's great for the men that are looking to contribute. That's awesome. But I always felt that women need great women role models. And I love to learn. I've had great women coaches and mentors. I like to learn from everybody. So we really kind of engineered putting her in the brand to be able to represent the part that I just, no matter how empathetic I could be towards women in business, I'm not a woman. So I just wouldn't, I don't know what it is to be a mother and have all those responsibilities. Or, like my wife says, she's gotten on stage, she's been fully pregnant and she's, she'll say, I feel like a whale, and she's still got to get on stage. And, us men, we're like, we stay pretty consistent.
Right. Right.
So they go through all sorts of different things in leadership and life, physically, emotionally, that I wasn't able to, have the same experience with. And so that really opened up a huge dimension for us. In fact, even today, we were just on with a marketing team that's marketing some new things for us online. And it's funny because out of all the images and all the marketing and everything, like this is the hero one. It's the one that's crushing it. We're getting 6% click-through rates when you normally get an average of 1%. What is it? They pull it up. It's a picture of Alessia. She's teaching
Right.
it.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of people struggle with partnerships. What do you think are some of the keys to have a successful partnership, whether it be with Alessia or anyone in your life?
Well, yeah, and Alessia and I have run a lot of family businesses. She ran one of her largest businesses, which was doing about 40 million euro a year, was with her parents. She was running that with her parents. And then we run our company together. My dad's our CFO, right? My sister was our CEO for a time period. So there's a lot to be said about that partnership and working with people that you care deeply about, whether it's friends or family or whatever. I think the most important part, especially if you're going to be partnered into a business, is that your values are aligned and that you feel like your values are on the same train, because making decisions, you're making thousands of micro decisions a week together. And it's just so much easier when your values are so aligned that everything is always kind of like, yeah, this is how I would have done it anyway. So nice job, like great decision. I think it's very complex when you hold different values, and just it's fortunate Alessia and I always say we're in Italian, you say anima gemella, which is twin souls or twin flames. And we're so aligned. I think that it's what makes it really work.
That's fantastic. It's such a powerful thing. I absolutely agree with you. When you and your partner have the same values and you're on the same mission, and if you have with your partner or partners different value components that you offer to the partnership, that's what allows a partnership to thrive.
Yeah.
So you highlight mentorship and coaching a lot
Mm.
with your content. Can you share more about some of your mentors and coaches, and what are some powerful insights that others have taught you professionally?
Yeah, wow, that would be a days and days of sharing all the great insights that I've learned from my mentors and advisors. So, um, I grew up in a family where my father, as much as I love him, is very righteous, right?
Mhm.
Very, you know, but, I think by lineage is
Mean
like
mean
Russian,
mean
Jewish,
Les is laying down the hammer on you?
right? Like, this is how I go, you go to school, you get a job, you get your degrees, Jewish family, right? So it's like
Right,
lawyer, doctor, like everything kind of set out rigid.
right.
And that didn't really work for me, obviously. And so it was a lot of drama as a child. And so I didn't grow up in a family where it was like, immediately. I mean, even though I was telling you the story, my dad researched and other people, it was still like, I'll figure out what I need and then I'll make decisions. So we didn't have a lot of mentors or coaches, and it wasn't the time period, right? That wasn't the big thing. My parents grew up in the 50s and 60s. It wasn't like there were coaches everywhere. So I got introduced to a personal development company about 19 years old from a girlfriend that I was dating who had actually done some personal development work. She thought I'd get a lot of value out of it. And I was very skeptical and I thought, this sounds weird and not interested. And I went to their first training weekend and I was open. I was open-minded, which I think is an important aspect of being a mentee or a student of a coach. And I absolutely loved it. And it gave me a lot of clarity and it helped me work through a lot of um, let's say muddled feelings or unknown things to just go, I get it. Here's how I can have more power in my life. And so I got really into the idea of that there are trainings, books, opportunities, and people that are trained to help others process through and work through the things that they're trying to figure out inside their heads. There's a great saying by actually a mentor of mine named Alex Mendosian, who's also worked for us, but also was a mentor. And that's part of what I love about, I think, great mentors, and even for me as well. We can be a student sometimes, and we can be a mentor sometimes, right? It's
Mhm.
just it's just being open to learning everything. And he would always say, it's hard to see the label when you're inside the bottle.
Mm.
And I love that saying because it just consistently reminds me that we cannot see what we can't see in our lives. And so to me, it's not getting a coach or a mentor is not about I'm doing something wrong or I'm not good enough or I couldn't figure it out on my own. It has nothing to do with that. And maybe that's going on, but it's really more of I just want to know, what do I not see because I'm inside the bottle and I can't see the label? What can you see? So while I was at this, I was continuing on with these personal development seminars. I met a coach. It was a gentleman who stood up. I had just started a media company with one of my friends from Berkeley School of Music. We started our first company. It wasn't going anywhere. We didn't know what we were doing, but we really never wanted to work for anybody else. And he stands up in the seminar and he introduces himself. He said, I just moved back from Los Angeles to San Francisco. I sold my media company, which was top five in the film industry. And I'm now coaching, executive coaching with my parents who have been top executive coaches in Silicon Valley. And I went,
Mm.
oh, I need to meet that guy. His name was Brian Franklin. I went
Uh-huh.
up to him and I said, Brian, I'd love for you to help me with my business. And he goes, oh, great. What kind of business? I go, it's a media company. He goes, oh, I just sold my media company. I know exactly what you need to do. He goes, great. How many customers do you have? And I went, zero. And he goes, sounds like a good company. And he started coming in and meeting with my business partner and I, initially just to support and help us. He ended up getting invested in the company. And we took that company to essentially top five in the world in about 4 years. It
Mm.
was a media company. We're working on soundtracks for video games and television and film. Ended up working with people like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. And we worked on a couple thousand video games for, LucasArts. And it was an amazing run. And I just got like my abilities are just a part of the puzzle. My talent, my drive, it's just a part. It's a good part, but I need to have others around me and surround myself with people who can give me great feedback, no matter who they are. Today, I learned great things from my children. I don't care how old they are, how experienced they are. If someone can give me feedback, I want it, and I want to see what they see so I can keep improving.
So you learn from these folks, these mentors and coaches. You're also a mentor and coach. So
Yeah.
how do you apply it to the people that you're the mentor for?
Yeah. Okay. So because I got so, I had started having so many mentors. I've had, 40, 50 mentors, and I pay these people handsomely. I mean, I pay them sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to give them pieces of equity in companies. Like the good ones don't, first of all, forget free, because the good ones are not free. Those are like the retired ones, or ones who really are not that committed. The ones who are really committed are in it because they're creating a big game for themselves, and they want to create big games for people around them. Tony is successful. He never walks in free anywhere, right? He wants you to have skin in the game through your investment. So I
Mhm.
was doing a lot of that in my 20s, and I thought, this is a really exciting type of career. So while I was running my other companies, I had media companies, we had e-commerce companies, we had eBay companies, we had a fund where we brought in internet company, we were buying and selling internet companies. I mean, we've been through, I had a scrap metal business in Panama, like we were just all over, because it was, restaurants, clubs, bars, everything. But at night and the weekends, I went, I really love this education thing that I grew up in. I really love helping people. And I felt like I had been given such a gift. I mean, when I was multimillionaire, by the time I was in my early 20s, I felt like I almost like to help and give back. It was my duty to support others who were struggling around me. People that I love that were really smart, great, talented people. And they're just struggling, going, how do I make money? How do I do this? So I started to work with them, and I discovered I had a real passion and a talent for helping people grow rapidly and get what they needed to do to build businesses and scale them up. So what I do now now I do it full time, is I essentially just work with founders and business owners. I'm either helping them launch new brands and marketplaces, or I'm helping business owners scale up to 7 or 8 figures and exit their businesses.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, step 6 in your 9-step formula is mapping out your success.
Yeah.
This includes mapping out how you spend your time over hours, days, weeks, and years, and also playing games that challenge you to answer, how are you going to get there to success? This level forward planning, I believe, is a bit unusual for many entrepreneurs. Um, Share more about your recommended approach to this.
Okay. My recommended approach to planning in general,
Mhm.
or any specific level you want me to address?
Well, planning and mapping out what you need to do to create success.
Okay, so I'm a huge proponent of visualization, imagining. Um, I do a lot of that, whether I was performing, I was performing in huge stadiums, or speaking, or planning what the year's going to look like. I like to visualize and imagine and create full-on movies as to what it's not going to be, but what it is, but just hasn't manifested yet.
Mhm.
I loved the idea from behind the movie The Secret, where, which there were some gaps in there for, I think, a lot of people, because you'd put up your vision boards and you would imagine what you want. But I learned a set of distinctions about how to take energetic things of what you want and actually create them as to what they are, and how to manifest. So I'm a big fan of manifesting. My favorite thing is to imagine and visualize what I want, and then create it, make it happen. That second part's the most exciting, right? Is the manifestation. And so one of the things I think is really important is people in detail allowing themselves to imagine and envision what they want. And the detail part, I think, is important, because many people who are feeling incongruent, like, I want to create this, or I want to create that, I don't think they get into heavy detail. They kind of get a general broad stroke picture, and then they wonder why they can't manifest those things. And I also think that people create visions that are so big that they scare themselves many times. So I kind of look for, when I'm creating visualization, one of the things I'd recommend for people who want to make a big difference is consider how you feel about that visualization. There's this thing kind of in the world of achievement where, like, you're supposed to have your dreams scare the shit out of you. Not really. That's a little bit too far away, I think. It's fine. Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, maybe down the road. I like to push on the edges a little bit, but you should also feel like I'm imagining something that doesn't exist, that feels just on the other side of my reach, or just a little bit further. And I'll give you an example. So we're training. I have an 8-year-old daughter, and we're training her to be a performer. And I'm super excited because she's got all the resources. I mean, Dad was a record producer. We've got all these famous people around us. I know the mix engineer for Celine Dion. Like, all these people are like, hey, when your daughter's ready, I'll take her under my wing. But you can't force that. You have to. The child has to choose it, right? Which I understand. So I encourage, but I kind of know where, we don't want to push her too much. We want her to be self-driven, so, self-initiated. So today she was saying, what she wants to do is she wants to shoot a music video for Christmas, where she's going to create a music video. And now we have to start conceiving and visualizing, what is it that she's going to do? And there's a lot of different choices. So she could she could write a song. She could pick a standard song. She could sing it. She could not sing it. She could just dance and perform to it. We could shoot a video of her. We could do high-end video. We could send it to, so there's all these little choices. And so I was sitting down and starting to visualize what she wants to get done. And I could feel where she would go a little bit so big that it'd be like become overwhelming to her. And I know if it gets overwhelming to her in her vision, she'll talk about it, but it'll crush her. She'll never get it done. So we keep bringing it back and saying, well, what would just be just a little bit of a stretch for you? Just a little bit. She said, okay, well, let's do she wants to do a Santa Claus is coming to town. Let's pick a standard version, pretty easier for her to sing. She's going to record it in the studio. And we just make little challenges along the way. So she feels inspired and it feels achievable.
Okay.
And the lesson out of this, which I think is so important, is I think a lot of people set up huge visions. I want to be a billionaire. They have no system or plan on how to get there. It's so overwhelming and so amorphous. It's just talk. It's never going to be able to get there. And it's not because they don't want it. It's just because there's no infrastructure for how to take step by step to get there. So I say set little stretch goals that just keep stretching you a little bit. If you just keep challenging yourself a little bit every day, you get 365 new stretches a year. You go a decade, you got 3,650 over a decade. I mean, that's a pretty good life, continue to stretch yourself.
It's a great life if you could do that. It's about commitment and focus when you can do that. So the name of the show is I Own It. And it's owning every aspect of your life and being responsible for your life and what you do. And was there ever a point in your career where you took a step back and be like, I don't own this. Like I'm struggling here. What was that moment in your life or in your career that you could look back and share?
Yeah. So I love the name. It's a great name, by the way. I Own It. And I love that it's a metaphor for a broader picture of life. And I'm going to answer you in that scope because people often comment on my confidence in business, but business is a holistic game. And there's times when I haven't owned my own shit, right? And by that, I just mean like I'm doing something or I'm not being accountable or I'm not communicating or I'm being kind of a baby about something, maybe in relationships. And to me, everything. So if I'm not owning it with my wife, my work is suffering, even if they're different things. It has nothing to do with each other. Like if I'm not fully owning my worlds, who I am, being, in my integrity, being in my communication, my self-expression, my values. Like if I'm not really in there, but I'm hiding from something, I'm resigned to something, I'm not discussing it, doesn't matter. In fact, I have thrived. There's a book that came out 15, 20 years ago called Fierce Conversations from Susan Scott. And I remember I loved it, which is that she said, the degree to which your life will grow and the success of your business will be is the degree to which you're willing to have fierce conversations.
Interesting. That's real powerful.
Yeah.
I like that.
So I took that on. So I have a practice of having fierce conversations, leaving nothing unsaid, nothing uncommunicated. I am always the one that has to negotiate all the shit problems with our company, deal with all the upset customers, deal with all the legal issues. Like I'm always the one that has to get into all the tough conversations.
Well, do you know what they call that?
No.
Leadership. The buck stops here with you, Kane. That's what it is. I'm in the same role, so I can appreciate that comment. It seems like whenever something has to get done or a tough decision, everyone always comes to me and says, all right, what is the answer? What's the solution? But those are the positions you want to be in because those are the positions that are the key players that generate revenue and wealth when you're in that position. So I actually welcome it. I love it. I love when people bring me challenges because I'm realizing like, okay, this is what success is about.
Yeah. And, there's a core tenet from neurolinguistics, which I studied for, almost 20 years now, which is that every action and behavior has an intended positive outcome. And so what I do when I get we're dealing with negotiations or issues or, we had very, very, very few lawsuits in our lives, but we have, some woman who came to an event and said she tripped on a cable and suing us for hundreds of thousands. So we have to always go into these different, and it all goes away because it's all ridiculous. But during those conversations, it's like, I go in with the sense of, okay, there's an intended positive outcome. Like, what does this woman really want and need? And how do we make sure everybody in the system gets taken care of, even if it's a fierce or ugly conversation for the time being? So that's a practice that we have. And it seems to have kept the energy pretty clean around us. And, COVID was a real challenge, man. I mean, we had 50 staff going into COVID and we had just laid out millions for stadiums and we were signing deals with, everyone was Simon Sinek and we were in conversations with Oprah about getting her out to stadiums, and it just, everything kind of collapsed. And you had to be ready for a lot of conversations. We had a lot of fierce conversations with our staff and, we had to do layoffs, and which I think most business owners, other than Zoom, were going through, at that time. And so it's not always easy, right? But it's not about easy. It's about commitment, as you said. And the commitment is to the commitment of values, taking care of people, making sure that everything is said and managed, communicated, listened to. And that's what our focus is.
No, that's fantastic. What's next for you in 2023? What are some exciting projects? What do you see down the road? Obviously, there's talks of us heading into a recession. I believe we're in a recession already. What are you planning in 2023? Obviously, to make Ben Reinberg the biggest star in the
Yeah.
world, but what else are you working on that you're
Yeah.
excited about?
Oh, yes, we're working. So we're working on Ben and his personal brand in commercial real estate, since he is a freaking hands down guru of that and needs to be known globally about helping people create wealth. And what I love about that, Ben, is because as I've worked with Ben and we're extracting out all the different parameters to his personal brand, is there's a lot of skepticism, which is what I love. There's skepticism to, can I really create wealth in that area? And this makes for a great brand, because the answer, and every time I've asked Ben, I was like, so Ben, are we going to really be able to manage these concerns? He's like, hands down, any person that takes this seriously will create massive wealth. And so that makes a great brand. So that, I mean, I'm excited about that. Excited to see you grow and help more people create wealth through commercial real estate in 2023. We as a company are continuing to get more. And so, I spent 17 years touring. I was, for 17 years, I was almost 200 days on a plane, 32 countries a year. And there was a lot of that, that go thing. And COVID put that all on pause. And we thought, well, that would be a pause, and then we'll get back into it once it recalibrates. But my daughter and my kids started to make some little comments at dinner about how much they missed me and felt like they weren't having me. And so there were some big internal shifts for me about values and importance. And so we've shifted from focusing on filling up the next stadium and running the next huge event to working on companies that will be changing the planet. So we're getting very involved in industries like alternative energy. We've invested a lot in solar and hydroponics, and we're involved in metaverse and how the metaverse can help education. We're looking at how to develop apps and working with different companies as an advisor. Because the best part I love about being an advisor is I don't have to take on the launching of everything. And I can be involved in so many different projects that I wouldn't normally take the risk, or I wouldn't normally take the effort, because it takes all that focus and effort to get one thing off the ground. So we're looking to continue to be involved in projects that can help change and transform humanity towards the better. And so our focus is in alternative energy and education through experiential immersion through the metaverse. And that's what we're focused on for 2023.
What advice would you give a young entrepreneur that's getting started in business from being a 19-year-old kid? You remember where you started.
Hmm.
What were some of the things that you learned that you could share with people that you said, man, if I would have known that when I was in my 20s, where would I be today? Or how much easier would life be? What would that look like for you?
Yeah. So there's two things. One is, I would say, start building wealth early. Stop looking at earning money, because I think most people train their children to start by earning money. We train our children immediately to start building wealth. So my 13-year-old has a business. He's got a dog basket business where he sells high-end dog baskets, and he's doing almost 2,000 a month in sales now while he still goes to school. My 8-year-old daughter has a fashion brand where she creates, fashion shoes and decorates hats and things, and she does about $300 a month in her stuff. And so when they get the money, the first thing we talk about is how it gets divided into part for savings, part gets invested, and then a smaller part, 20 or 30%, gets to get spent on whatever they want. And so the first thing I would start teaching any young child is how to build wealth, not how to make money. Because money comes and goes, but wealth is something you create generationally, and you create through recessions and hard times. We were fortunate. I was fortunate enough to actually hit financial rock bottom around 19 years old, where I went into a lot of debt and ended up sleeping on a friend's couch. And so I understood what it meant to be really broke and not have money, and decided that was not going to be my future, especially coming from my house. It was a really shameful situation. But I was not going to take anything from my
I,
parents.
I think that's a member of the tribe kind of thing, that guilt that gets carried through, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's just, there was no taking handouts, and I didn't take anything from my parents. My parents were very upset that I had chosen the musical path, and then we ended up, so it was really, you're either going to figure it out by yourself, or you're going to die trying. It was that kind of thing. And so I found mentors, and I just, you don't have to do it yourself. I think that's another important lesson. This stuff's already been figured out already. Now you get to choose your own creative design to your world. Everybody's different. Ben gets to create his awesomeness. I get to create mine, and we do it in our own way. But the systems, the techniques, the help, it's already been done. So don't try to reinvent it, and don't be, resistant or difficult. Just take the help and use that to go further than you could on your own. So those are two things that I always tell my children. I also demonstrate that by hiring mentors every year and advisors. We spend hundreds of thousands a year on mentors, advisors, and spiritual advisors and strategic advisors and everything we can get our hands on. And I'm always telling them I'm meeting with my advisor, I'm meeting with my coach, I'm meeting with my consultant, my advisor, because I want them to know they should be building wealth and meeting with great people daily. And they're doing that, which is great.
It's a great lesson, and becoming what I call resource rich, having resources around you to help you elevate you on the learning curve faster is so important in life. And people always ask me, like, how do you get there quicker? Well, you get there quicker learning from others, surrounding yourself with good people that can help you grow and teach you. That way you limit your mistakes and you create more success. So I appreciate you touching on that. Well, Kane, we're going to wrap up, and we always wrap up with three questions.
Hmm.
So if you were in the studio, we have a couch that you can't see, and I would say, Kane, get on the couch and lay down. And I would probably say it that way. I'd say, get your ass on the couch and lay down, and and then I would say, close your eyes. The You're now what, 45, I believe.
44.
44.
44, yeah.
You're a young growing man, and you're laying on the couch, and you can go back in time and talk to your 16-year-old self.
Hmm.
And the Kane Minkus today that's learned a lot of lessons, a lot of relationships, a lot of success. You now have two kids. What would you tell your 16-year-old self if you can go back in time today, who you are, to give advice to? What would you say to yourself?
Okay. And how many pieces of advice do you want, or just one?
You can go for long. I mean, how much time do we
All
have?
right, well, I'll keep it to a
Is
few.
this mic still on? Are we gonna be tapping it?
All right, I'll give it to a few succinct ones. The first one I would say is, and I'm going to say this in a negative, so and then I'll try to rephrase it in the positive, which is never doubt your vision. Like
Great,
I
great
think that
advice.
as a young entrepreneur, as young people, there's a little bit of this voice of the not knowing, and I think that anytime I have said, well, maybe I don't know, so I should do it some different way. And it's the vision. It's not the tactics, right? I mean, tactics, absolutely question that all day long. I mean, maybe what you're doing is not working. It's no problem. Find a better system or better solution, but never question your vision. Um, and if I had that advice and somebody in my life saying that at that time versus I had a lot more of always question everything kind of thing. My mother, which meant well, is basically saying question everything so you can determine whether what you're doing is the right thing for you, right? Which is a great way to look at it too. But I think inadvertently I would question whether my vision was the right vision. Or I take somebody else's opinion and they'd say, you need to do this or you should do this. Like nobody else knows what you should do. So just tell them all to just, F off. But great people with good ideas or good strategies or proven systems, that's great to check out and determine what do you think about it. So be open-minded, but never doubt your vision. I think that's one of the first things I'd say.
Wasn't it interesting when we were kids? Like when you would fail, people would say, well, maybe that's not right for you. Like failure wasn't really accepted like it is today. It's
Mhm.
not where, back then it was more like, all right, Kane, you tried the music gig, it didn't work. Instead of saying, well, maybe you should keep going because
Yeah,
maybe it's just you didn't hit your stride, or maybe you weren't playing the right instrument or whatever it might be, instead of saying, okay, shift, pivot, continue what you're doing and create that success. Nowadays, I think it's really more open and accepted.
that's the word. The word is not do something different. The word is pivot, right? And this word became very powerful during COVID, so it got very, very heavily used. But it is a word that is so important. And I agree with you 100%. So my wife, who's brilliant at just creating high achievers as well, she had a very interesting accident. She was a championship horse jumper. I'm trying to think of the word, but really,
Equestrian.
yeah. Well, that's the proper word. Yes, it's a show jumper. That's what she calls it. So she was a show jumper. She would jump horses. She had several horses in Rome where she grew up, and she was very, very accomplished. She had a lot of awards, winning at different competitions, things. And she had, at about 22 years old, I think, she had an unusual accident where she went to jump a horse, and the horse stopped, and she flew over the bars and landed on a cylinder block and broke her spine. And she ended up in the hospital, and they didn't know she'd be able to walk and all that. And of course, obviously, she did heal up, and it was okay. But she created a very strong, and she got back on horses, and she kept going. Which, many times people have a traumatic incident, they go, "That's it. That was a sign. I'm done." But she didn't let that do anything, stop her. She got back, and she continued to show jump until I think she was almost 30 years old when I met her. And then she met me, and that was the end of that world.
She did she downgrade? Is that what you're saying?
She's like, "Yeah, I
Or
used to
did
jump
she
horses. I
upper
used
level?
Yeah, I used
Right.
to dance salsa 3 times a week, and then I met you." It's like, "Jeez."
Right.
But she created this saying to my daughter, who is clearly, just her soul is a high achievement soul. And one of the things she started in as a sport was ice skating, figure skating. My older sister was a great figure skater, and so it was kind of the family, and we were hockey players, growing up in Chicago. And so she started, and of course, when you skate, you're falling all over the place, right? So she started this saying to her that falling is part of the game, and that if you're not falling, you're not playing the game. And she just really embedded this in her. Falling, if you just say to my daughter, "Hey, Rania, falling is," and she'll say, "Part of the game." Like,
Oh,
even
that's
to say,
cute.
like, it's just embedded like a mantra. And so that is, I think, a really important saying, that you're going to fall, you're going to pick up an instrument and sound like garbage. I mean, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to screw things up. And that is just a message that it's, maybe you need a little pivot, and you need to keep going. You need to find a better way to do it. And that word commitment that you keep bringing up, it is the golden nugget for success. You committed long enough with smart enough strategies and pivots. Like, don't just keep hitting your head against the same wall. I mean, that's ridiculous. But it doesn't work. Do a little pivot, find a new mentor, get a new strategy, understand how to reposition. And, positioning, that's one of the things everybody comes to me for, is, positioning. I love that, because with a little bit of repositioning or a little bit of pivoting, what wasn't working can become massively successful.
All right. So my next question to you is, it's our last day on earth, me and you.
We're
And
together and alone. Sounding
we're just
romantic already.
we're alone. It's just us two.
I love it.
And it's our last meal, and it's your choice. What are we eating for our last meal?
Oh, it's easy. It's
All
Italian.
right.
It's
Okay,
Italian.
I love Italian. All
Italian.
right, what well, lay it down. What are we eating? I
Oh
mean,
my gosh. Okay.
come on.
Wow, what we start with? We start with some grilled octopus,
Oh,
um,
oh,
right, with a little bit of olive oil, some
oh,
salt,
I
maybe
love it.
some olives on it. What are we moving into next? Probably a classic Caesar salad,
Ooh,
um, and
no
then we probably,
croutons.
no croutons, because we're both gluten
Okay,
free, right?
right.
Probably into a salt crusted bronzino,
Oh, oh,
right? Okay.
with the head on, and they'll fillet it in front of us?
Whole thing, oh, yeah, they just
Oh,
bring
yeah.
it, wheel it
Oh,
out
that's
to the
my favorite.
table, they
I
open
love
it
it.
up, right, what
Love
else?
it.
Grilled vegetables,
Mm.
on the side, we'd probably have, let's see, we would make just a fresh fruit platter for dessert. I mean, but it's, oh, pasta, of course, pasta, but, gluten-free pasta, of course. Oh, but
Mm.
pasta con vongole, so we do with the pasta and clams,
Uh-huh.
and that would be
And
the fish, the pasta.
what are we drinking? What are we washing this wonderful, extravagant meal?
Well,
That the meal might end up killing us, but but what are we drinking with it?
well, I think even on the last day of Earth, I'm gonna honor my values. I am a non-drinker. I don't drink any alcohol, so we do kombucha. We have
Oh, good.
lots of flavors of kombucha in our refrigerator. We do coconut water, and then we do water. We spray a lot of sparkling water. That's kind of
Fantastic.
our thing
Well,
here.
we're perfect together then. That's a
That's
good
right.
date. That's a good date.
That's right.
So, I've been of all of my guests, I've been waiting to ask you this question because, one, I've seen you play the piano. If anyone doesn't know, Kane is a very talented musician. He won't tell you, but he's really cool when he plays piano. He's really dynamic. So in the studio, we have a grand piano. That's why next
Yeah,
time you have to come to the studio, because we can actually have you play.
yeah,
We have a drum set and we have 6 electric guitars behind us.
yeah. That's great.
So if you were in studio with me, okay, you could pick any musician or band, they could be deceased or living, to play us a song, okay, and you're here sitting with me, and we could bring in anyone. Who would it be? Who would play us a song that your choice?
So, um, my favorite piano player, probably of all time, I rotate between three, so I'm trying to figure out who I would say, but I'm going to give you all three because I think they're
Okay.
very important. So the first one is Bill Evans, and he was a jazz piano player. He used to play with Miles Davis, and I studied a lot of jazz, and he's just the most magnificent arranger of jazz. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's one of my favorite piano players of all time. I can listen to him anytime and just drift off into like happy land. My second favorite one is Bruce Hornsby, who I loved, and I loved what he did with sort of a percussive jazz pop feel, and he was a great writer and just a really technically great piano player, but wrote beautiful songs and played piano on this Bonnie Raitt song, called "I Can't Make You Love Me If You Don't." That song, just gorgeous, gorgeous piano on that. And my third favorite idol in piano and piano vocal, because I sing and play, is Billy Joel. I played just about everything from him, and in fact, I auditioned when he brought his Broadway show, called Moving Out to, New York. I auditioned for it. I was, maybe 20, 21 years old, and I got up to the last 3 piano players. There are hundreds and hundreds of piano players, and I got to the last 3 of them, and they cut me because they weren't sure if I was, they felt I wasn't quite old enough to fit the part for what they were trying to do. I was a little too young looking, but I just remember auditioning and playing, "Bottle of red, bottle of white, anytime you're in the mood tonight," whatever lyric is. Like, I love his music as well. I grew up on his stuff and just great, great, great songwriters. So those are the 3 piano players I'd bring in and jam with if we had that opportunity.
Between the meal and the singing, I feel like I need a glass of wine in my hand. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, I'm in that mood. I'm in
Right.
that mood already, so
Meet
I
you
appreciate it.
anytime you want in your
Italian
Italian restaurant.
restaurant.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
love it, love
Yeah.
it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You are just a wealth of knowledge, and next time we'll have to have you in the studio in Laguna Beach, and it's always great to see you. What's the best way for our audience to follow you, learn more about you if they're interested in your advisory services? Like, what would you recommend would be the best way to connect with you?
So naturally, we have all the social media stuff happening. I'm really not that good at social media because I just don't. I take the time from my clients and my family and everything, so I can't say I'm the best at that. But we do have our team that interviews us, pulls our own knowledge out of our head, and goes up. So if you want to continue to learn how we think and stuff, go to our social media. You can just find us by searching. Kane and Alessia is really where it's at, and we both contribute to our social channels. I like our podcast. I think our podcast gives us an opportunity to talk and get more deep. I love these things like what you've done here, just to really extract and get in deep with somebody versus try to give them a snidbit in a picture or something. So I like our podcast too. You can go find our podcast, Industry Rockstar Podcast, on any of the channels, Apple and things like that. That's probably the best place to continue to engage with us.
There's some great guests too. If you go on to his website, I think it was it kaneandalessia.com.
Yeah, you
Is
can go to
that correct?
kaneandalessia.com and that'll take
That's a good way to kind of learn about Kane, but also you can hear his podcast. He has episodes on it too, and he's
yeah.
has some really talented, really well-known guests. So I
Yep.
definitely encourage
Richard
that.
Branson's on there. We've got
Yep,
Kevin Harrington on there. Les Brown is on there. Randy Zuckerberg, founder of
right.
Facebook Live. And yeah, we got some great guests. And Ben
Yeah,
Reinberg will be coming up on there.
absolutely. Well, if you're interested in learning more about me, go to benreinberg.com to follow the Ben Reinberg I Own It podcast. Drop kick the lower right hand button and click subscribe. We'd love to have you continue. We continue to roll downhill with amazing guests, just like Kane Minkus today. And obviously, if you are interested in commercial real estate, feel free to go to our company website, alliancecgc.com. And if you're interested in investing in commercial real estate, feel free to look at our website. You can invest in our brand new Alliance Medical Property Fund, which we just recently launched. So, Kane Minkus, you own it. That's why you're on the show. Keep rocking, keep helping and inspiring others. And thank you so much for coming on today. And I'll look forward to seeing you very soon.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for having me.